The Coast Guard says this former provincial ferry is an environmental hazard and they're making plans to get rid of it. The owner is not pleased, but locals say they'll celebrate when the Captain Earl W Windsor is finally towed out of here.
It's shameful. I mean, it's a disgrace to the community.
What we're looking at behind me is an ecological disaster. It's a huge chunk of metal waiting to rust and fall to the bottom of the ocean here.
The Coast Guard says it has no choice but to act. The Earl Windsor, it says, is in poor condition and contains pollutants and other hazardous materials. On 2 occasions last year, environmental crews responded after the ship started taking on water, and special equipment was brought in to remove thousands of liters of contaminated water from the vessel. So the Coast Guard is using the authority granted under the Wrecked, Abandoned, or Hazardous Vessels Act to take possession of the Earl Windsor and have it scrapped. The Coast Guard is looking for an experienced contractor who can cut up and dispose of this 1,600 gross ton, 75-meter-long steel-hulled ship in an environmentally responsible manner. The bid deadline is December 16th. It will cost millions of dollars and take months to complete. The Coast Guard will oversee and pay the contractor for the work. But when the job is done, this man will get the bill under what's known as the polluter pay system. This is Springdale businessman George Yates. He owns the Windsor, this crowded dock, and other ships, barges, and vehicles on this waterfront property. He's a divisive personality in this Green Bay town of about 3,000 residents.
Yates initially agreed to an interview, and he described what's going on here as government overreach and out-of-control bureaucracy. But he later declined an interview, saying it was on the advice of his lawyer.
But Yates opened the lock gate and allowed us a close-up look at the ferry that once carried passengers and vehicles on the Fogo Island Change Islands service. Yates says the vessel is not abandoned, is tethered securely to the dock, is empty of all hydrocarbons, and can be made seaworthy in about a month if the right buyer comes along. He says he will use all legal means necessary to block the Coast Guard from taking his property.
Coast Guard officials refused to do an interview because they say there's ongoing legal matters. But in a statement, they said all efforts to have Yates take responsibility for his vessel have been unsuccessful.
The Earl Windsor was built in 1972 and is a familiar name in coastal communities. The ship was once part of the province's intra-provincial ferry fleet. It was retired from the ferry fleet in 2016, and the provincial government sold it to Yates 2 years later. Yates towed the vessel to Springdale, and it's been laid up ever since. Here's what Yates had to say about it in 2021.
I bought that legally from the government of Newfoundland and Labrador 2 years ago, and it's just part of the regular routine business. We buy and sell stuff all the time. And that ferry was used right up to 2018. It's not a derelict of any kind. And some people rent apartments, some people rent cars. We rent storage space for boats.
Yates owns multiple properties in some very prominent locations in the town and is known to fill up those properties with vehicles, boats, trailers, and heavy equipment.
I think the majority of people in town expect a person to do a little better and take better care of stuff like this.
Yates also has a tense relationship with the town council. Here's a video from 3 years ago showing a town-hired excavator tearing down Yates's dilapidated waterfront warehouse. Town leaders are refusing to comment on the decision by the Coast Guard to remove the Earl Windsor or on its ongoing run-ins with George Yates. But area residents say there is widespread frustration and embarrassment over the condition of Yates's properties.
Why does he insist on carrying on what I would call environmental pollution in the town of Springdale?
Has this situation tarnished your image of your hometown?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're really putting a blemish on our town by the condition of the waterfront.
It's not uncommon for wrecked, abandoned, or hazardous vessels to be removed by the government from Newfoundland and Labrador waters. But none were as big or will have involved as much work as the Earl Windsor. Terry Roberts, CBC News, Springdale.